What's going on, family? Welcome back to the From the Bottom FS channel. Today we got Thomas Sowell meets a feminist. So without further ado, let's get straight into this video. Come on.
I would like to ask both of you, if I may, the same question. Uh, Both of you seem agreed that in the 1950s, Harvard and Yale excluded blacks and Jews and were
30s.
30s?
Yeah.
Excluded blacks and Jews. And in fact, in another
Emphatically.
program, Bill, you said that
Emphatically.
you think it's the other way today, that Harvard and Yale discriminate against Anglo-Saxons.
Well, to the extent that they believe in affirmative action, they would necessarily have to discriminate
I
against
would like
somebody.
to know what you think changed this attitude from discrimination against blacks and Jews to, in Bill's opinion anyway, the opposite extreme.
May I?
Yes.
I don't see it as a change of attitude. I see it as a change of whose ox is gored. And the change is simply a political change in the larger society. It's cheaper for non-profit organizations to discriminate, no matter who they discriminate against. Therefore, you would expect them to be in the forefront of discrimination, whether it is direct discrimination or reverse discrimination. And that's largely what you find.
Well, you're saying that it was to their advantage to discriminate against blacks and Jews before, and now
No,
it's
it was
the
never,
other way?
it was never to their advantage to do so, except insofar as they simply had prejudices, which they were able to indulge. I'm saying that whatever they do, discrimination costs them a lot less than it costs someone in a competitive industry. Highly competitive industries, for example, sports and entertainment, have typically been much more open than much more closed-in kinds of non-competitive things like public utilities and non-profit organizations, foundations, universities, hospitals, and so on.
What would you do to help those blacks who are still in a very low economic condition in terms of education, for example? There are, as you said, many blacks today who are still being given totally inadequate education, cannot be expected to get very far for that reason. What would be your remedy for that?
I know.
That's very easy. I would allow their parents to have a choice of where to send them to school, whether that choice is called a voucher scheme, open enrollment, tuition tax credit, any kind of scheme of that sort that would put that power in the hands of their parents. Mainly because that would mean that the schools would have to be responsive to them. As it is now, the school is a monopoly. They need not be responsive. I have relatives right here in New York whom I've had to intervene for because the schools would not even treat them decently, much less give them access to the information they wanted that they were entitled to under the law.
If you put it in the hands of the parents, and the parents are themselves uneducated and not really aware of what the various potentials are, what makes you think that they would decide more intelligently than the present system?
I think, again, history. As blacks emerged from slavery, a minute percentage could read or write, and yet in half a century, over half the black population was literate. An economic historian has called that one of the most remarkable things in history. If you look back to the era prior to the Civil War, when there were free blacks about 500,000 in the United States, they not only were not allowed in the public schools, they were in some states forbidden even to send their children to private schools and had to do so clandestinely. And yet the census of 1850 showed that most free blacks could read and write. So I don't think that the fact that people have little education means that they are in any way poorer judges than distant bureaucrats who have their own axes to grind in running the public school system.
But you yourself said that you thought one of the reasons why blacks were still in an underprivileged position, those who still are, was because they had not been given a proper education. And we are now talking about people who had not been given a proper education, making decisions for their children as to what is a proper education. And you're saying that they, if that was put up to them, they would make a wiser choice than the present efforts to integrate the schools.
Let me say that if they would not make a very different choice, it would be hard to understand the hysterical opposition of teachers' unions to giving them that opportunity.
Well, I have no comment on that, but I would like to know how Bill feels about improving educational opportunities.
I believe with Dr.
So I do want to touch on what he said there for as far as giving, I guess we would say, underprivileged kids and underprivileged environments the chance to go to these bigger schools with the voucher system. That's actually not a bad idea. But of course, I would have to say that, every parent would try to send their kid to the best school possible, which may cause issues with overcrowding or they might be put on a wait list and so on and so forth. But we kind of do see it nowadays where it's like depending on where your home is located, where you live, that kind of dictates where you go to school in the public school system. Unless you go to a private school, you can you can do whatever you want. But in certain cities and certain environments and certain towns, if you stay on the less fortunate part of town, you're gonna go to the less fortunate school. So that's really a layered issue right there, and that has to be resolved. That's not a there's not like a straight answer for that, in my opinion. If you guys think so, let me know down below. But that's a multi-layered, complex issue right there that has to be attacked from every level, as far as like government, local towns, funding, and local businesses, coming together and figuring out something. But at the end of the day, your economy of your city, of your town, kind of decides the education system. It's rare to see a poor economy with a great high school, or a poor economy with great colleges all around. It's always, where the money goes, kind of where the best schools kind of go. So let's get back into it. Let's go.
The hysterical opposition of teachers' unions to giving them that opportunity.
Well, I have no comment on that, but I would like to know how Bill feels about improving educational opportunities.
I believe with Dr. Sowell that the voucher system obviously encourages parents to use the same kind of selectivity that's available to parents who have enough money to send their children to private schools, and that to give a versatility of choice, a flexibility of choice to parents of poor children, the same versatility that is given to parents of wealthier children, is obviously desirable.
And you think that their ability to make the decision is equal?
No, but I think it may be equal, maybe less equal, maybe more equal. I think that the phenomenon of the poor and uneducated parent who seeks for his or her children what he himself has never achieved for himself is much more commonplace.
Oh God, yes.
Than the kind of sated, self-satisfied parent who typically neglects the education of his child.
I think you'd have very
That's
few
good,
blacks
that's
who finished
good.
college, including myself, if they had to have college-educated parents to send them there. There was no one in my family that went to college before me, and among the blacks that I know of my generation, I would say that's the rule rather than the
Sure.
exception.
My son, the doctor syndrome.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that insofar as your own experience is concerned, you are clearly an exceptional person. And it is somewhat reminiscent of what the Minister for Women's Affairs said in France when she was asked whether there was going to continue to be a Ministry of Women's Affairs now that women had achieved such great strides forward. Her answer was, as long as the average woman does not have the same opportunities as the average man, we need to have a government office which will try to get them some sort of equal opportunity.
But it's precisely the
And on top of that, you guys, so just throw it out there. I don't believe in the feminist movement. I don't believe uh, we have a better opportunity to be successful than women. If you look at our society, the way it is built now, it's literally built almost for women. You know what I mean? Where everything's designed around to protect the woman. If you go to the court system and you're a man, you're gonna get drugged, especially if you're married. Any aspect. I mean, as far as like jobs go, and we've already talked about this on previous videos. I think it was Jordan Peterson's video where he discussed the higher paid jobs are dominated by men because I guess they involve more danger, and because it's more danger, it's more work, more stress involved, and men genuinely take those jobs, and women generally take the less stressful, less dangerous jobs. But that does not take away from the ability and the option to have a high income job. So it's all about people's individuals' choices on what they want to do. We don't live in a society where we would deny a woman the job of fixing the power lines if she applied for it and she would had the right background for it. We don't live in that kind of society. If that woman chooses to do that job, she can apply for it and she can compete with everybody else for that job and that's just the way our society's kind of built. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I don't believe in that. I don't subscribe to that. I think it's just, I don't know, kind of full of hatred a little bit towards men, and it's all, to me. It's like a control mechanism for women to use, I guess, in my opinion. Of course, you guys comment down below. Let's get back into it.
Government, which is denying it in this case. It's the government which is.
Let's run that
Is
back.
as the average man, we need to have a government office which will try to get them some sort of equal opportunity.
But it's precisely the government which is denying it in this case. It's the government which has been running these schools from which the kids graduate semi-literate. And for years, black parents have been sending their kids, not just me, but a whole generation of blacks, to college, to high school, whatever. If you look at the history of black education in the United States, that has been largely, at the beginning, an effort by the blacks themselves. It was 1916 before there were as many blacks attending public high school as were attending private high schools. So there's a very long history of blacks trying to get their kids educated. I might say
true.
from my experience, again, not my own story, but at black colleges, the parents who work nights and fathers drive cabs and mothers who scrub floors to see that their kid gets an education. If there weren't such people, you wouldn't see half as many blacks with college degrees today.
And they're
Right.
beating down the doors of Catholic parochial schools,
That's
even non-Catholic blacks, to get in there.
Yes.
What percentage would you say of the total number of blacks were in private schools or beating down the doors of parochial schools? Would it not be a considerably less than half percentage?
That's right, because they don't have the money. And you could have made exactly the same argument against the GI Bill, that why should you have a GI Bill for people to go to college when only the rich go to college? Well, the reason the rich were the only ones going to college at that time was because there was no GI Bill. The whole point of this is to put this choice within their hands. It is hard for me to understand what harm is going to be done by allowing parents to have a choice as compared to having self-interested bureaucrats have a monopoly.
Well, I think that your notion of parents having a choice overlooks the tremendous degree of family disorientation which exists in all communities, including the black community.
Single mother families, a single mother has the same incentive to send her kid to the best school she can get him into as any other parent.
There are, of course, many children, particularly of high school age, who are totally disassociated from their parents.
That's true. I think that would be a considerably less than half, too, to use your phrase.
I would like to, for a moment, ask you some questions about the economics of job getting in terms of the blacks versus the whites. The statistics I was able to pull together indicate that at the present time, white males make $17,427 on an average basis for the year. Black males make $12,738. White females make $10,244, and black females make $9,476. It is clear from these figures, as indeed I think it's clear to most of us from what we see, that there is a discrimination against blacks and against women in our present system. Since not all blacks will be superior, how would you try to even that out so that there would be some equality of job opportunities?
Yeah, I'm sorry you missed the earlier part of the program when I pointed out that where you find people not represented evenly, that does not show the institutional effect, because almost nowhere in human affairs do you find people evenly represented.
Well,
If you compare comparable people with respect to age, with respect to education, etc., you get a totally different picture, both with respect to blacks and women. Now, the figures that I saw, for example, show more recently that if you take black families where the husband and wife are both college educated and compare them to a white family where the husband and wife are both college educated, the black family is now earning $2,000 a year more. The problem is that very few blacks fall in that category. That when you compare category for category, then we're talking about getting people a decent education. I'm saying that you cannot say that numbers collected at the employer's place of business reflect simply the employer's policies. Those numbers reflect underlying conditions in the whole society, just as numbers collected at a hospital do not show you that the people are sick because they're in the hospital.
No, I would agree with that, but you would also have to agree that, generally speaking, women are paid less, for example, for the same jobs as men.
No, I would not. I would not agree with that. If you're talking about women with the same number of years of experience, with the same continuous service, et cetera, then when I look at that, I don't find that disparity. I find, for example, in many cases, the women are making more, depending on how you break the data down. The difference with women is between married women and everybody else. That's the real difference.
Right.
Well, even as to single women, the Census Bureau statistics, the most recent ones I could find, 1978, say that single men are earning $11,100 and single women are earning $9,300.
Yes, I love the word single that is used. When I
Right.
did my study, I didn't use single, I used never married. You see, a woman who is single at age 40, having spent 10 or 20 years raising children, is really not quite the same as a man of age 40 who's been working continuously for 20 years.
And the differential she cited is not that great, so it could easily be accounted for by the point
Yes,
you
because when I
raised.
break them down the other way, I did this for the academic world, and there I
And you gotta watch that, man, because people will spit out facts and they'll change small things around to make it seem like it and paint a picture of a certain image. But and then Thomas Sowell kind of read that straight through and kind of just destroyed that immediately, right? Nice. Let's keep it going.
And the differential she cited is not that great, so it could easily be accounted for by the point
Yes,
you
because when I
raised.
break them down the other way, I did this for the academic world, and there I found the women who are never married, which is the term the way I take it. There they were earning more than the men. And similarly, when the government did data some years ago on women who had been working continuously since high school into their 30s, there you found that they were making slightly more than men of the same description. So the difference is between married women and everybody else. And married men get an extra bonus because their wives take care of many things that enable them to put more time into their careers.
I'm sure you're aware of the fact that there are approximately 15% of all homes in which there is only one wage earner. So that when you talk about women being able to take care of things for their married mate wage earner, the fact is that in the overwhelming majority of American homes, the women also work. And therefore, I don't think your explanation that women have other responsibilities and that's why they are...
Work can mean part-time work or full-time work. Women do not work full-time to the same extent that men. Part-time workers make less than full-time workers.
Simple as that.
May I ask a question about unemployment? The latest figures I saw indicated that of black youth...
I'm not gonna hold y'all, man. Thomas Sowell is shutting her down. Like everything she's trying to throw at him, he's smacking it away, and he's being respectful, and he's just giving you the facts without emotion. That's probably one of the best things I like about him so far. He doesn't tie his emotions into what he's saying. He just gives you what he studied and gives it to you as is. If you want to get emotional about it, go right ahead. But it is what it is, man. Let's keep it going.
About unemployment. The latest figures I saw indicated that of black youth, something like 46% of those who wanted jobs were unable to get jobs. I really would like this time to ask both of you to respond to what would you do in that situation. If you would assume for a moment that these are people who do want jobs and are unable to find work.
I would, first of all, repeal the minimum wage law, because if you go back to, say, 1950, 1948, 49, 50, you find that at that time, the unemployment rate among black teenagers was a fraction of what it is today. And there certainly wasn't any less racism then than there is today. What was different was that at that time, the minimum wage law was a decade old. It was a decade of inflation, and the law hadn't been changed. So for all practical purposes, it didn't exist.
But don't you think
And
that
as
was also a decade of expansion in which there were a lot of jobs, whereas today our economy is in a recession and there are not that many jobs
If you look at the
available.
most prosperous years of
Let
the
the man
60s
finish.
and 70s, you don't find black teenage unemployment as low as it was in the recession year of 1949.
Well, I don't know what the job situation was then, but it's only recently that we have
I
reached
do.
the
I was a
point-
black teenager in 1949.
Did you
It was
get
a
a job?
recession year, and after a considerable looking, I found a job. But the point is, the kid who was
Let's go.
living where I lived then, who's living there now, he has a hell of a lot harder time finding that job because there are so many good people who have tried to do good for him and priced him right out of the market.
Well, facing the situation as it presently exists, what would you do for that 46%?
If the situation is going to remain as it presently exists, the results will remain
No,
as
I'm
it presently
saying
exists.
now, today, what would you do to help
I would
this 46%?
repeal those things which
But
is
that isn't going to help
demonstrably-
these 46%, is it?
He
Nothing.
getting tight.
Something has
do you
to be
want
done
do,
about
do you
that.
want to change it or do you want to leave it the same? If you want to leave it the same, everything will continue the same. If you want to change it, it'll change.
No, I think that your suggestions of change contemplate that in the future, the situation will be different. But I'm asking you about the 46% of black youths who are now unemployed, who probably would not be affected by changing the law this year.
You can say that all you want, but the evidence is totally against you.
May I add this datum, just out of respect to Mr. George Keller, who is the assistant to the president of the University of Maryland, who writes
Listen,
in the New
y'all.
York Times,
Hold on.
28 January 19...
Yeah. Let's wrap this up. I think we have seen enough. All right, we've seen enough. He's hard to beat, man. I wanted to let that run a little bit. Kind of cut back on the stops and all that good stuff and just listen. And from this one, she was trying her hardest to throw her stats out, her research out to him, and ask like these loaded questions. And he kind of had the simple answers, man. Like, I mean, even towards the end, he was like, if you wanted to change, it'll change. If you don't want it to change, just continue doing the same thing you're doing right now. Like, what do you want? You know what I mean? And it's not going to be equal. It's not going to be fair. Life isn't fair. It's not going to be balanced all the time. He made a comment in there like, even with the kids who are in the area with like the worst schools, the worser schools, all right, or the least educated schools, right? If the kid or the parents truly want what's best for the child, they'll find a way. And we see it all the time. It's not one-offs anymore. We see a lot of kids coming up from bad neighborhoods, and we're not just talking about sports. We're talking about other careers as well, finding a way out, and that's becoming, which is a good thing, a common story. You know what I mean? Coming from nothing, coming from parents that don't have no degrees, one parent household, all the statistics were stacked against you, and you still found the way out. And it's kind of what he's saying. It's not ever going to be perfect. Every school is going to be the greatest school around, and that'd be a nice society to live in. But unfortunately, some people are going to have to come up from the sticks, come up from the bricks, come up from the bugs in the house and all that good stuff. So great video, man. Great video. If you guys haven't checked it out, I'll link it. I'll link the rest of the video. I think there's like 10 more minutes left, 5 more minutes left. In the description. And if you made it this far in the video, make sure you guys click like, subscribe to this content. And as always, man, y'all be safe out there. Peace.